Hello and welcome, to my latest career video. Is another heavyweight. It is indeed Frank Slavin, of course, who was a heavyweight contender in the 1890-1910 period. So we will go through his main career points. So on to the major opponents. Frank Slavin fought Bob Fitzsimmons, fighting to a draw. He then fought and lost, to Australian heavyweight Peter Jackson, before then gaining win over former coloured middleweight champion Frank Craig. Next up, former coloured heavyweight champion Bob Armstrong, Frank Slavin, or we're going to call him Flank Frank Slavin, fought Bob Armstrong, suffering 2 defeats. Slavin then fought Joe Butler, also on 2 occasions. Joe Butler, former coloured middleweight champion. Big shout out, mate. Good to see you, buddy. Frank Slavin scored 1 win and suffered 1 defeat, and he twice defeated Jake Kilrain. Now, next up was the fight I covered yesterday, Peter Marr, the Irish puncher. Frank Slavin fought him on 1 occasion, suffering a defeat, and he twice defeated contender Mick Dooley, and then fought a trilogy against Martin Costello, scoring 1 win, 1 loss, and 1 draw. Next up is Harry Lang, Frank Slavin defeated him, and he twice fought Jack Burke, scoring 1 win, no loss, and 1 draw. Next up is Jim Daly. Frank Slavin defeated him in their 1 fight together, and he twice fought and lost to contender Jim Hall. The final 2 names on here, the first was Steve O'Donnell, who Frank Slavin lost to, and then he did fight fellow puncher Nick Burley on 4 occasions, scoring no wins with 2 losses and 2 draws. So that is his first major opponent slide. When we go on to second slide, there's only 1 more name. That is Joe McAuliffe, who Frank Slavin won. So there are 27 fights highlighted there, of which Frank Slavin has won 11, lost 11, and drawn 5. So a very split record, beating some good names, but also losing to many other names as well. So when we go on to the first of his stat slides, we see Frank Slavin scored 38 knockouts in his career from his 47 wins, so a high knockout rate. 28 of those knockouts were in 3 rounds or less, and Frank Slavin scored 8 first-round KOs. Now, against champions, he scored 2 KOs. He also scored 2 KOs against Hall of Famers, and he scored 1 KO against a pound-for-pounder. But being pre-rating era, he has 0 KOs against rated fighters. So when we go on to the rounds boxed for Frank Slavin, he boxed a total of 347 rounds. Yeah, big shout out to Drunk Irishman in the chat as well. He fought 0 title fight rounds, and Frank Slavin fought a total of 31 rounds against champions, 24 rounds against Hall of Famers, and 19 rounds against pound-for-pound fighters. Now, again, being pre-rating era, he fought no rounds against top 10 fighters, top 3 fighters, or ring champions. I was actually debating at one point, the major fight system, I was going to depict those rounds as hypothetical rounds against top 10, top 3, and rounds against ring champions. But what I decided in the end is it's a bit too hypothetical for my liking. Yes, it's okay shouting names out on a resume and giving people an idea of who fighters fought, who were not rated due to there being no rating era. But at the same time, it then adds a hypothetical kind of non-fact in with factual information regarding the rounds that fighters fought in rated era. So that ultimately made me decide not to do that. Also, it saved me a lot of time, but I didn't want a hypothetical stat being matched with a factual stat, if you get me, so that's why I never did that. So there is the KOs and rounds box slide for Frank Slavin. When we go on to his slide against champions, we see Frank Slavin had 7 fights, scoring 2 wins with 4 losses and 1 draw, and Slavin defeated 2 individual champions, Frank Craig and Joe Butler, who were both former coloured middleweight champions. And some people would say, well, is a heavyweight fighting a middleweight? Well, point 1, Frank Slavin wasn't a huge heavyweight, and at that time, many fighters did that. Fitzsimmons wasn't the only one who fought from middleweight to heavyweight. You had Nick Burley, the puncher, a bit of a vulnerable puncher, but a heavy puncher nonetheless. He fought pretty much, he was literally a middleweight, and he fought up to heavyweight. You get Frank Slavin, you get other fighters doing the same. So it was quite a normal thing in this period. There wasn't even the original 8 weight divisions. In fact, there was 6, and in fact, it can be argued only 5 at one point. But, you know, it is what it is. So, in terms of the champions he knocked out, both of the champions he beat, he did actually stop, Frank Craig and Joe Butler. So, when we go on to the Hall of Fame slide, Frank Slavin had 4 fights against Hall of Famers, scoring 2 wins with 1 loss and 1 draw. He defeated 1 Hall of Famer, that is Jake Kilrain, and he also stopped Jake Kilrain. So far, he's stopped every champion and Hall of Famer he gained wins over. Not every time, you know, when I say that I don't mean every time, but, you know, like with Peter Ma yesterday, every name who was a champion Hall of Famer and pound pounder beat, he actually scored stoppage wins over all of them. Same so far with Frank Slavin. So when we go on to the pound for pound side, we see he keeps it again, you know, 4 fights, including 1 win, 2 loss and 1 draw. He defeated 1 pound for pounder, the aforementioned Frank Craig, who's also on the champion list, and he stopped him, so he has scored 1 knockout against a pound for pounder as well. So not as big a numbers as Peter Ma, so to me a less impressive feat than Peter Ma did, because Peter Ma beat more fighters across those categories than Frank Slavin did, but still, you know, a tiny little, fairly unimportant accomplishment to most people. So, on to record against rated opponents. Frank Slavin, of course, fought no rated opponents, so he has no fights against top 10 fighters, top 3 fighters, or ring champions. Thus, he defeated no rated fighters individually and scored knockouts over 0 rated fighters. And when we go on to the title fight slide, Frank Slavin has another Baron slide. You know, help made Baron by the fact he's pre-rating era, but he had no world title fights, so he has no win, no loss, no draw, made no defences, scored no KOs, and defeated none of the opponents in those 6 categories there. Again, a lot of that, aside from champions, Hall of Famers and pound for pounders, they will be more filled in the rating era. So on to the final slide for Frank Slavin. Okay, basically he won no world titles, having no world title fights. And therefore he was never lineal champion nor undisputed champion. So basically there is the video on Frank Slavin. These videos are not as long. Okay, I've cut quite a few slides out. You know, maybe I shouldn't have cut so many out, but at the end of the day, this is a good format. It's nice and easy, nice and clean. You know, BL question, I'm doing a longest unbeaten streak from start of a fighter's career. Is Fred Dyer's 94-0 streak valid? To be honest, I don't know too much about Fred Dyer. What era did he fight in? Let me check him out. That's a name I've probably heard it, but it just don't ring a bell at the moment. I'll probably see him and think, oh God, it's him. Oh, Fred Dyer. Yeah, I don't really cover Fred Dyer because he fought, well, he was born 1880s. He's not a fighter that I've covered on all my research. So a new name for me. This is really strange because this guy, who exactly did he fight? Because the name rings a bell, but I've not actually researched him properly. But what I'll have done is I've in all the fighters' careers, I've covered well over 1,500. It's just not a career that I've researched. So, again, my knowledge on him is limited. You know, I've done over 1,500 fighters research their careers, but not him. So, again, he's from that early era. You know, a bit like another name who I have done a bit of research on, Nipper Jack Daly. You know, a lot of people don't know about him. Fantastic fighter, turned pro very young. You know, his career was finished very young as well. I might do a video on him at some point because it will shock people. But you know, some of these fighters from back then, these more obscure fighters, even I don't know much about. So I can't help you on that one, I'm afraid. But all I would say is be very careful on the sources for this 94-0 streak, because back in that time, as you may or may not know, some fights will be called wins on a record, but when you research them, they actually were considered a draw and everything else. So, yeah, same with draws. People say, oh, no, he lost it, but they called it a draw because he's managed a new ref. Yeah, so, yeah, it's very hard to verify that. You'd literally have to verify every fight of that 94 fight to know if it's fully verified or not. But there's a name I don't know much about. I'm sure I've seen his name on records, but I just can't place where. He's not a fighter I've even ever researched. So I can't help you on that one, I'm afraid. So, yeah, even I have weaknesses, and that's one of them. I've never researched him. I'm trying to think where I've seen his name, but yeah, I've never researched him. So anyway, back on topic, okay. Sorry, I'm trying not to get distracted on these videos. So there's the video of Frank Slavin. I hope you managed to find out about that, but like I say, to really say whether that 94-0 streak is valid, you would have to verify every single one of those 94 fights. Otherwise, you can't really ever say it is valid. You know, you can go on sources online, or you can go on what people have wrote in books. But, you know, I've read some boxing books, and I've absolutely diametrically opposed what certain things have said. You know, I read in a group once, a social media group, where someone said that the only fighter from Joe Louis's era that, you know, McVeigh and Jeanette and them could beat were Johnny Paycheck. What I found, the comment was so ridiculous that I didn't even, yeah. So, you know, but even I haven't researched everybody, so I don't know. So anyway, yeah, so you'd have to verify. You'd have to list the 94 fights and hunt them down and see if you can verify them all. Because also another thing in that time, what you get as well, and what I found doing a lot of research is, you know, I'll look at a guy who was, say, 26-3-1. You can find fights that are not listed on the record, just no matter how good the website is. Or, you know, I've even found fights on fighters' records that are not even in books that people have wrote about fighters. You know, it's so deep and hard back then to find and nail down everything. So I think it'd also probably be an impossibility to nail down that. But, you know, I wish you every success on that little tenure. I can't assist with that, I'm afraid, because I'm far too busy doing everything else. So anyway, I'm going to get off anyway. So there's the video of Frank Slavin. Sorry I babbled on a bit, but yeah, a new name for me there. I'll do some research on him when I get some time, start building a picture. I might even create a career file for him and get his career mapped out. We'll see. But anyway, there's Frank Slavin. He'll be scored into my new top 1,000, what will come quite a while away. And